And thank AFN for allowing us to conduct our press conference here in their beautiful offices. And I also want to acknowledge the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people for allowing us to be on their beautiful territory. We've traveled here to Ottawa because coastal First Nations in our communities have been constantly excluded from the MOU discussions about the North Coast pipelines in our beautiful traditional territories. We want to make it very, very clear. Anytime there is discussion about our territories, we will be in the room. We traveled here last night on the red eye to get here to ensure that we bring the voices of our community forward. At this time, I'd like to introduce Gagwis. He is the president of the Haida Nation. Gagwis.
Hawa Christine, Sing Aila, good day. Hawa for being here today. Today we want to speak to the motion that's on the floor in the House, and today this conservative motion for our nations ignores the important duty to consult and the need to work together and reach consent from the real rights and title holders in the territory that these proposed projects go through along the BC's North Coast, Central Coast, and Haida Gwaii. It's really important that we remind Parliament and Canadians about Canada's legal obligations with First Nations, which means that the government, must work with us and consult on a nation-to-nation basis, government to government, to seek consent when it comes to major projects in our territories. So what that means is when Canada implements legislation like the Building Canada Act, that the government of Canada must uphold the honor of the Crown and its obligations to First Nations under Section 35 of the Constitution Act and the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. And that can't be sidestepped, and so we need to be in the room, we need to be talking government to government. So today we are calling on all the MPs to stand with the coastal First Nations to uphold the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act and protect our coast, our coastal economy, our way of life from the catastrophic risks of an oil spill. The North Coast and Haida Gwaii is not just the source of our current economic livelihoods, but it's our home, it's our responsibility to look after our territories for current and future generations of coastal nations, but of all people who live in our territory, and so that all Canadians and British Columbians and people from around the world could come and visit and enjoy the bounty and the beauty of the place that we call home. It's important for our food security. Salmon is key to our way of being, to our history, to our sustenance. And we must recognize that these projects continue to add risks to our self-sufficiency and our food security. And a lot of these conversations talk about putting food on the table in terms of jobs and dollars, but literally we survive off of what the ocean provides. So protecting the coast means also protecting thousands of jobs and hundreds of businesses and billions of dollars in economic value. Our coastal economy contributes over $3 billion every year and is continuing to grow, and employs up to 30% of the people on the North Coast. So the tanker ban, staying fully intact, is foundational to protecting the coast and our growing the sustainable economy that we've been working hard together to build up over the last 30 years. And I think to understand that a little more, that means keeping the pipeline and any oil tanker traffic out of these waters, especially the Hecate Strait, which is very shallow. It's Environment Canada has it listed as the 4th most dangerous body of water in the world. Wave swells can reach 10 to 20 meters, and we need everyone to understand the geography, the area, and the risks that this pipelines pose. And we have never supported the pipelines or the tanker traffic, and they're not part of our vision for a healthy, sustainable, economically diverse economy on the North Coast, Central Coast, and Haida Gwaii.
Thank you, Gauguis. I just want to point out that the Northwest BC alone represents over 40% of the already shovel-ready major projects identified by the federal government. We want to get back to our successful track record that we have been able to do. Want to work back with provincial and federal government on projects that protect our environment, deliver jobs to our coastal communities, and support our livelihoods and the livelihoods of everybody that works and lives in our territory, and the thousands and thousands of people who rely upon this on the North Coast. We understand that these are very challenging economic times, and that's why we support projects that are built in partnership with Indigenous people, protect the environment, and that benefits to all Canadians. Thank you.
We will now take questions from media that are in the room.
I should have mics on.
Sarah Ritchie with the Canadian Press. Hoping that you can just explain why you felt it was necessary to be here today for this motion. As a non-binding thing, the Liberals are calling it a political stunt. Do you see it that way?
Well, we do see, a lot of this as just politics, but why we're here today is because this is our home, and any of these conversations happening out here in Ottawa without us being part of it, we take it very seriously, and it's important that we're here to make sure our voice is heard and we uphold our responsibility, but also to witness, what happens here today.
What have you heard from the government and from Liberal members of Parliament when you tried to have conversations with them about the MOU?
We are having discussions now about bringing the Prime Minister and some ministers to our community. So I think it's really important. We have had that initial dialogue, and we're working towards that to ensure that they are coming and meeting with the rights and title holders in the North Coast to start that discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Ryan Hilty with the Toronto Star. You talk a little bit about the waves and the conditions on the Hecate Strait. Do you see any potential where oil tankers could travel there in a manner that you would find safe and acceptable, and have no risk there, I guess?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I would say that's a no. Like, to have no risk, zero risk, is something that isn't possible. There is no way to clean up an oil spill. There's no technology. And so in those areas along the Hecate Strait and Dixon Entrance, it is extremely dangerous, extremely risky, and we need to do everything we can to keep the crude oil out of those areas because of that fact that there is no way to avoid the risk.
I must also share that this tanker ban, variations of it, have been in existence for over 50 years. And that's got to say volumes, that doesn't change at any time, because it's based on what's in front of us. And one of the pieces that we've been really thinking about is with these new LNG projects that were announced, that's 471 new ships that'll be coming through the North Coast. And then you add tankers on top of that, is absolutely craziness.
That was actually going to be my follow-up question. LNG Canada has been operating since, I guess, this summer. What has that done to your coast, and concerns do you have, I guess, about possible expansion?
Well, it is adding to the shipping traffic of much larger carriers coming through our territory, in addition to the current volume of shipping coming out of the Port of Prince Rupert. And so each ship adds cumulative effects in terms of impacts to the ecosystem. We are experiencing already the introduction of European green crab, which is decimating ecosystems currently as a result of shipping. The strikes on whales and other mammals, and basically the risks of, the more traffic there is, the risks of engine failure or any other issues with the ships. There is very little capacity to respond in a timely way, and even the bunker fuel and other things that these ships are carrying are already a significant risk. And I think that's really important to understand, is there is no risk assessment currently for all of the existing shipping and the projects that are on deck, and that each, what we're balancing here is that there already is a significant amount of activity all around this area, the waters, and adding to it is what we fear will tip things over the balance.
We can take some questions from our online Zoom link if anyone has questions from online.
Should add some jokes for you guys in between.
Just while we're waiting, I wonder if you can talk to me a little bit about the situation with the government. Like, what conversations have you already had with them specifically about this?
Let me take that.
Go ahead.
So as I mentioned earlier, we are working with the federal government, the Prime Minister's office, and some of the other ministers to have a conversation. This is not a conversation that individually that we're having. We're going to have them come up to our territory to have that initial discussion. So we're planning to do that in sometime in the month of January.
Okay, we've got a question here from Cindy Tran at the Edmonton Journal. What has the engagement process been like with Alberta? And have they given you any sort of indication that they will meet with you to address the concerns that you've raised?
Want to take that first? Want to take that first?
Sure. Thanks, Cindy. I would acknowledge, I think the Alberta government is, I think, keen to reach out and have discussions. The environment, or the Minister of Indigenous Relations, I think has been trying to make contact with some leadership on the coast. Our message is, though, that we need to be, working with the federal government, and as Christine mentioned, that's where our focus has been here, is building that relationship and government to government with Canada. And we've been working very closely with the government of British Columbia together on our position on this project and our cooperation on implementing rights and title in British Columbia, but also on the other projects that are being discussed. I
must add to that we know that Most recently, you'd see GitGat's press release that they did have a meeting and that they were very clear that they are not in support of any alteration to the Bill C-48.
Maybe I could just seek a clarification from you folks then. If there's no support for any alteration of C-48, then what is the discussion that you're having with the federal government? Like, is there a way for a pipeline to go to the coast without that?
Our discussion with the federal government is about sitting face-to-face, government to government, nation to nation, and building a relationship, trying to build some trust, not on this project, but making very clear, what our expectations are if there's proposed projects in our territories that are going to have a significant risk to our way of being and our culture that's developed over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and remind the Prime Minister and the government that Canada is a very young country. Our nations have been responsible for looking after our territory for thousands of years, and it's really about trying to reset and reestablish our relationship between Canada and the nations, and hear directly from them on what their thinking is in working on this MOU, doing it without us, doing it without British Columbia. But we also recognize the situation that the government is facing, and we do want to work together and be partners and find areas of common interest and alignment. Unfortunately, the oil pipeline is not one of those areas.
And we also have many historic agreements that we need to be discussing with the federal government. We have just recently the Project Finance for Permanency, the PFP for the Great Bear Sea. We have a lot of work that needs to be done on that. As Gagwis talked about early, the transportation that's happening in our community now with some of the LNGs that have come online, making sure that our stewardship, our guardians are well supported in the work that they need to do ahead. So we have a lot of items that we want to cover during our meeting. The pipeline is a very small component of that.
We have a question here from Amanda Fosgood at the Tyee, and she's asking, Skeena Bulkley Valley MP Alice Ross has spoken in support of the Conservatives' motion this morning. I'm wondering what Gagwis and Christine would say to the local MP who appears to be showing support for an oil pipeline and reversing the tanker ban.
Well, I'd encourage Mr. Ross to talk to the people in the riding, to visit the communities, the nations, and it's not just the First Nations, it's not just our Indigenous governments who are opposed to this project. I could speak clearly and firmly that all of the elected leadership on Haida Gwaii stands against this project. That's municipal leaders as well. And all of the people who call Haida Gwaii home are very concerned about this pipeline and there's discussions going on. So I think it's important that the MP really represents all the voices in the riding and not just the party position.
We have another question from Mark Page, Black Press Media. If this pipeline is built against the Coastal First Nations consent, will this endanger CFN support for other projects such as LNG export projects?
Do you want me to take that one?
You could start.
So I think it's really clear. So my board of directors, which are the leaders of each of our respective communities, the title and rights holders of our communities, had made it very clear that we're focusing on the Bill C-48. It's really important work. It has consumed all of our time and our bandwidth within our organization. And that it's really important that we ensure that we have our voices heard within this within this fight that we have, the battle that we have. And I think that you know, I haven't had any direction otherwise, but I know that there's obviously lots of concerns about cumulative impacts that are happening, as Gagri's talked about, the green crabs that is a very invasive species that are now taking over not only Haida Gwaii, but coming to the north coast and expanding there.
I just want to add, in terms of that question, I think, you know, one thing is important for everyone to think about and reflect on is, you know, the relationship between Indigenous people and the nations and the province in this case and governments is important. And we've all worked very hard to confront the truth and the history, but also look forward at how together we work closely, we build better lives for all of our communities, all the people who live in the territory, in the province. And the province has worked hard to build relationships with nations in British Columbia, and I think Canada needs to understand and respect that, and it is a fragile balance at times when we're looking at the amount of activity that's being proposed for northern BC. It is going to put a lot of, there is economic opportunities, but also puts strain on communities as well, and it's a delicate balance, and so I think you know, it is something that needs to continue to be nurtured, and we need to keep working on that trust that's been established, and having a project jam through against that affects our title and rights and harms our territory, damages those relationships that are so important to all of us continuing to move forward in a good way for everybody.
This is a question from Marie-Helene Martel from Radio Canada. The Liberals will vote against the motion today. One of the reasons they say is because the motion is not respectful to Indigenous people. Are you hopeful for the next steps? Are you feeling heard?
As I mentioned, we are in the works of having that meeting with the Prime Minister and some of the ministers in January. So we're hopeful. We obviously have built this really great relationship with the federal government. We have done some historic agreements. The Great Bear Rainforest is an example of one of those agreements, along with the federal government and the provincial government. The Great Bear Sea, which we just signed last year, is another one that is historic in nature. And Coastal First Nations and our communities have been traveling around the world talking about these historic agreements that we've done together. That's where we're hoping to get back to.
I don't believe there's any more questions, so with that we can conclude the press conference. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, well, thank you.